we're so happy that you all can join us. Thank you so much for being here and for joining this. So for those of you that I haven't met, my name is Marissa Sawicki, to call our gym, as well as for leadership in the business world, one of our summer programs on campus. And I'm also a MBA student, which stands for Masters in Business Administration here at the Wharton School, which basically means that I'm getting my graduate degree in business. So we've had this awesome summer so far. I can't believe it's coming to an end soon, but we've been exploring all these different career options with some of the best that Wharton has to offer. We've had alumni working in real estate, data and insight, sustainable investments, and AI-powered entrepreneurship, just to name a few. So thanks to everyone that's been able to join and hear some of those. Today's guest is actually going to extend this entrepreneurial theme in a big way. So we are lucky enough to be joined by Andrew Dudum today. And he is the founder and CEO of Hims and Hers, which is a direct-to-consumer company that operates both men's and women's health brands. The company's mission is to eliminate stigmas and make it easier for people to access care and treatment for the conditions that impact their daily lives. Andrew's also a founder and active angel investor, an advisor to more than 24 startups. So that's 24. Incredibly impressive and cool. We can't wait to ask you about it. And he actually graduated from Wharton with concentrations in entrepreneurial management and venture capital. So that was a lot, but Andrew, thank you so much for joining our career chat. It's so great to meet you and have you here.
Yeah, thank you all for having me. I'm excited to chat and hopefully answer some questions that everybody has.
Awesome. So I think the way that we will do this is I'll start out by asking you a few of my own questions, but then we really would love to find out what's in the minds of all the students that are joining us. They all have incredible questions and we'll probably hit you with some hard ones. So just giving you a little bit of warning, they don't go easy. So for the students that are on the call, please drop all your questions in the chat channel. Go ahead, you can DM them to me directly, or you can put them to everyone. We'll make sure that we can hit on as many as possible. And so with that, Andrew, I know I was able to give just a brief introduction on your background from a work experience, but if you'd want to just give us a little background, maybe on where you grew up, what you studied in school, and just a little bit more about you, we can maybe start there.
Yeah. So I'm originally from San Francisco, so I was born and raised in the city. I, in the early years was not a, business oriented person at all. I was actually a musician. So I played cello and was in a band. Nice. We got some Bay Area people in the chat. So I was playing cello in orchestras. I was in like a rock band in high school. I was playing weddings for money, side hustling all through my 13, 14, 15-year-old kind of ages. I remember going down to like downtown San Francisco when I was 15 and playing on the street like every weekend, trying to make money to buy a car. So I was always more on like the artsy side of the house, but trying to figure out how to like hustle with the arts to make some cash. It's maybe the best description. I then applied to college. I really wanted to go to Stanford. And when you're a San Francisco kid, Stanford's like the place, right? Because it's 30 minutes away. I was fairly limited in my understanding of East Coast opportunities, kind of born and raised in the Bay Area. You just really know Stanford and Berkeley as your like top. So I wanted to get Stanford, got waitlisted, and then I ended up getting into this place called Penn. And I remember applying to Penn. And during the application process, there's like this box, like, are you a liberal arts type of person, or are you a business person? Like, do you want to apply to the business school or the liberal arts school? And I was like, I've got kind of the arts down. I'm playing music. Like, let's see if I can learn some business side. So I literally applied to Wharton in that way, ended up going to Wharton. At school there, I studied or tried to focus much of the study away from the traditional finance program, which is really what Wharton is famous for, and tried to take advantage of some of the up and coming entrepreneurial stuff. So this was like learning about venture capital because I was from San Francisco. I heard about all these startups, but I didn't really understand how it worked. So I took legal classes about venture capital. I took history classes about them. I took a lot of entrepreneurial classes where we would have to pitch ideas and get good at kind of like convincing engineers to build things on your behalf and just kind of get in the weeds. And the thing I really loved about Wharton in particular, if anyone's, applying, was it's just such a practical education. Like the people around you, they just love building and love testing and coming up with ideas. And there's this thing that's a famous thing called the reality distortion field. Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, was always said that he had this, which is this concept that like you believe you can create something amazing, and to other people what you're saying might sound totally insane, but your ability to like will it into being by just like really hard work and convincing people to tag along on your team and do it with you, and get the best and the brightest working on your stuff, like that was a skill set that I really learned at Wharton, and it was powerful. After that, I ended up starting companies with a whole bunch of Wharton people, which was really fun. I founded Atomic Labs, which is out in San Francisco, which is literally a group of people who just builds companies all day long. We have a huge pool of money. People like Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen are, super famous investors of ours. And we had, $200 million a year to prototype and test companies. So we would test 20 or 30 of them every year. We'd end up finding the ones that worked and we'd launch them. I did that for a really long time. And then most recently, in the last few years, I founded and launched Hims and Hers, which offers a whole range of healthcare products from, hair loss products for men to anxiety and depression medications for people, sexual health products, shampoos, conditioners, like all types of stuff. We took that company public about a year and a half ago, which was really exciting. And now I run that company in the public markets. So it's a whole new world for me of learning how to be a public company CEO and experience what that brings. But have a lot of fun building stuff. And I think that's really been kind of core to the tenets of what, the last 10, 20 years has been for me.
That's so awesome. And I just think back to the first thing that you said around how all of this started with also like having wanted to go to Stanford, but then you ended up at Wharton, and it's crazy just how that path leads you and how that got involved with the people that you worked with and where you are today. And that's something that's so relevant to this group. A lot of who are going to be applying to college probably in the upcoming year or 2 years. Yeah.
I've always found the place you end up at college is the place you're supposed to be at. You have this perspective, I think, or at least I did when I was like a sophomore and junior and senior, this school is perfect for me. Like, this is where I belong. And I think oftentimes you're just not aware of what the schools can offer you. And the admissions departments are actually pretty damn good at being like, you know what, Andrew, we know who you are based on this. We have a good sense of you. We actually think you're really going to thrive at our school. And so I've found, when I look around a lot of my peers that have been really successful, a lot of them didn't get in where they wanted to, but they're so thankful they ended up at the school that they went to, just because it really was a better fit and it let them grow and learn and thrive in a much faster way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, so relevant right now. And it's like that hindsight 2020 on it. And so I hope that you all in hearing that can take that as you think about applying to schools, because
take a deep breath. It's going to work out. It will.
Exactly. Okay. So you started telling us a little bit about your latest venture, Hims and Hers, which is offering this modern approach to health and wellness through telehealth, just went public in the last couple of years. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a very fun business to run because we're essentially building consumer brands. I get to work with amazing celebrities to like market our brands. I get to work with amazing creative people to come up with the next products that we're going to launch for our brands. And ultimately, the really cool thing about this business is we're launching products that everybody on this call is going to like really need at some point in their life. Right. And I think it's really fun for me as an entrepreneur to build something that I can use and to build something that my family and friends use. So, literally every single person in my life, whether it's my grandmother who, uses our vitamin sleep gummy bears because she's 94 and can't sleep anymore, and she literally like takes 2 of them every night, to my mom and aunts who are using medication sprays for hair loss, which happens when you're in your 60s and your 70s, all the way to my friends and my wife who are using customized skincare products, or medications for anxiety or depression that they're struggling with. It's a business that I think is really just about feeling good. And I think our mission is actually, like, this might sound really simple. Our mission is to help people feel good. And that's it. And so we focus on the conditions and the things that people worry about. We wake up in the morning, we are tired, we're lacking energy, we might have some pimples, we might be worried about our hair, our sexual life might not be as good as we want, we might be a little bit depressed. Like, these are real things that affect how we feel every single day. And those are the types of areas we focus. We like to design products, launch products, and connect you with doctors and specialists that can help you feel your best.
That's awesome. And I know that you mentioned that you all went public. Could you tell the group a little bit more about what that means? And then this might be what are the strategic decision points that go into deciding to go public?
Yeah, so you can be two types of a company. You can be a private company or you can be a public company. Private companies, what it means is that you are not essentially accessible as an investment to the average person, right? So you think of like some cool startup idea that is being worked on in San Francisco in a Stanford dorm room, or you and some buddies are building it in your garage. That's a private company, right? Me as an individual, unless I get to know you personally, I can't invest in your company, right? Because it's kind of it's not known yet, right? It's still kind of in its infant stage. Eventually companies go public. And what this means is that anybody around the world can buy stock in your company. And this is what, people hear about the New York Stock Exchange. It's like literally a physical place where you go and become public as a company, and you like ring this bell and you're like, now we're officially a public company. And what that means is that you can literally go onto like, Robinhood app or something, and whatever app you're using to like look at stocks, and you can click buy, and you can see, and you can own part of that company. So as a founder, the benefit of going public is a lot of things. One, awareness. Like, by going public now, all of you and all of your parents and friends and family can understand my business. I get to share the metrics of our business, how we're doing, and you get to learn about us. And then if you want, you can invest in us. And that's a really great, amazing opportunity. And then second, it allows us as a business to raise money. So if we want to, launch a whole new category like sleep, let's say, and we want to raise $100 million to invest in research and products for sleep, we can tell the markets. I can go on CNBC, news, and be like, we're excited about this. We want to raise money, and people can invest in that idea. So it allows a company to, I think, really scale, and it allows a company to get a whole bunch of awareness. And usually you have to kind of hit some milestones, like you're doing a certain amount of revenue. It's grown big enough that you can really be allowed to trade on places like the New York Stock Exchange.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes total sense. And as the CEO now of a public company, how has that changed the way, I guess, that you run Hims and Hers? Is there differences that you notice in like what your day-to-day looks like being private versus public, or is it pretty similar?
I think a lot of people believe it's very, very different. Mm-hmm. And from my experience, it's almost the exact same, which I think is really surprising. A lot of founders, they don't want to take their company public because they think there's too much scrutiny, or it's too much work, or it's there's a lot of administrative stuff. And that's true. It is hard. But ultimately, what I spend my day focusing on is building the company in a way that's going to create a whole bunch of value for the people that own shares. And that is the same whether or not we're public, whether or not we're private. The things I focus on every single day is working on better understanding our customers, better understanding how we can market to them, new products that we should launch for them, how we can make the experience better for them. These are the things I spent all day working on. And this is the stuff I was doing when we just first started. So a lot of the skill set is very similar.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want to pivot a little bit and ask you some questions about Atomic.
Yeah.
So I know that you worked with Jack Abraham, who's actually someone who's been very involved in the Wharton Global Youth. He was actually one of the featured members of the Wharton Global High School Investment Competition.
Nice.
So we know him around here. We know that you are partners and co-founders for Atomic, a self-described company builder and venture fund all in one. Can you describe Atomic's business model to us, and maybe some of the companies that you founded and funded through Atomic?
Yeah, so Atomic's model is actually really quite simple, which is we have a large pool of capital that has been given to us by investors. So families, rich individuals, venture capital firms, private equity firms, like big, schools, endowments like Penn and Stanford, right? These big institutions give us money and they entrust us to deliver great returns, right? To hopefully deliver more money than they gave us. The way that we do that is by building companies from scratch. So, you can't, it's not like Y Combinator, if anyone's heard of Y Combinator, where you can like apply to Atomic and then we invest in you. It's not like that. All of the companies are started totally internally within Atomic. So it's ideas that come from me or Jack or other people within the companies that say, hey, this is something I'm really interested in. Maybe we should put a little bit of money towards testing it and learning about it and seeing if there's a demand for it, and seeing if customers want this. And so over the years, we've tested hundreds of ideas. I mean, hundreds of company concepts. We get really good at, moving fast. Over the course of a couple months, can you test a full concept with a really low amount of money? And then when an idea is working, or when we have conviction that one of these ideas is going to work, we'll actually then create it as a legitimate company. We'll invest in it directly, millions of dollars. We'll help build the team around that company, and then we'll kind of chaperone it as it gets older. And so it's a really fun model because you are kind of in at the ground level of building companies, and you do it over and over and over again. So you get really good, I think, at kind of figuring out what's going to work and what's not going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And a question that I was just thinking about with this is, how do you kind of manage having a hand in so many of these different startups, and whether you stay involved or like what the different role is? How do you manage that piece of it?
It's really hard. I think something Jack and I, have talked about for probably a decade since we've been working together is this concept of, like high value time. Most people think there's only so many hours in a day. Like you can't get done all of the stuff that you want to get done. And I think we have this really high bar for what is the stuff we should be working on versus what are the things other people should be working on.
Yeah.
And being high leverage with your time, which means like, when you're focusing on something, make sure that you are the best person in the world to be focusing on that. Because if not, go get somebody else to be focusing on it. And so that's really the mentality that we have at Atomic. That's the mentality we have at Hims and Hers as a company, which is we want to be dedicating our time to the most important stuff. And so when I jump in and advise startups or teams, it's at really key moments when they're thinking about raising money, when they're thinking about bringing on board members, when they're struggling to recruit, maybe they have to go through a pivot. These are really high value moments that as an investor or as an advisor, you can come and have a big impact on. The day-to-day stuff, they probably know it better than me, right? And tactically speaking, they're better off doing it than I am. So I think really focusing, and this I think is just a general skill set, focusing on what you're best at, ends up being really valuable in your career. And learning what you're best at and experimenting with, figuring out what you're best at is, I think, a really valuable exercise.
Yeah, totally. And a question that I have off of this as well is, what does your day-to-day look like when you have your hand kind of in all these different pots and you're thinking about what you should focus on versus what your team should focus on? What would you say your week looks like? A typical week?
Yeah,
it's probably hard to have a typical week, but
yeah, it's a little crazy. I would say I probably split my time 3 or 4 ways. Maybe 25% of my time is checking in on the business, right? Understanding what's working, what's not working, trying to figure out what the core priorities need to be, making sure that those are in motion with my leadership team and my management team. And so I think 25% is like keeping your finger on the pulse of your company, right? Like understanding what's happening and what you need to adjust in order to make it succeed. I would say 25% is recruiting. The people who you have in your company is like the most important thing ever. And so I am constantly meeting with new candidates. I'm constantly meeting with recruiting firms because we've identified we might need to hire this type of a person. Let's start the process. Let's meet people. I'm constantly meeting with experts to see if they can connect me with other experts on, critical roles that we have. So I would say that 25% is business kind of oversight. 25% is keeping like a great pipeline of talent coming into your company because talent matters more than anything. I would say 25% of my business or 25% of my time right now is learning, which is actually like trying to figure out other avenues where I can get smart that I could then affect my company. So for example, with Hims and Hers, and I think actually somebody on the call, one of their parents works with the company on this exact thing, which is retail partnerships. So Hims and Hers is in companies like Target and Walmart stores and CVS and Walgreens, like all of these different places. And that's not an industry I knew much about. As an entrepreneur in San Francisco, I didn't know anything about how Target works or Walmart works, right? I know that I go there and buy products, but I don't understand their business well enough. So, I'll spend time getting to know what are the trends in those stores so I can then bring it back to our company and think about how we can innovate in order to take advantage of those trends. And then I would say the last 25% is really, thinking about where the company is going to go long term. And as the founder, you are kind of you carry the torch for the direction of where the company is going. Everybody, even if they're super senior, they look to you for you to tell them where the company is going to go and what bets do you want to make on, taking the company in different directions. And so thinking through, where we want to take the company and how you want to position the company is something I spend a lot of time on.
That's awesome. And one thing that these students have been learning about in some of our classes is about the concept of culture. And you started touching on this a little bit with talent, but how there's not necessarily such thing as a bad culture or a good culture, only a culture that works for different people. And so I wanted to ask you, as a leader, what types of cultures do you try to foster for the talent that you bring in? And what do you, when you say like talent is the most important thing, what are some of the traits and attributes that you look for in the people that you work with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've always been of the belief that you can't create your company's culture. But what you can do is you can hire your company culture. So like who you hire in your company ends up becoming the culture of your company. So if you hire a whole bunch of assholes, right, and they are really, really smart assholes, and they are super competitive with each other internally, and they battle, and sometimes that means like great stuff happens because they're really fierce, and sometimes it means really bad stuff happens because everyone doesn't trust each other. That will be your culture, right? Your company culture will be competitive and fierce and maybe tough around the edges, and a lot of people won't enjoy that, and a lot of people will enjoy that, and that will essentially be how your company is perceived and what the day-to-day exists. You can't go out though and say our company culture is like, assholes and competitive, and we're going to make it that way. It just really comes from the types of people you have in the company. So where I spend all my time on company culture is actually investing in who we're going to hire, because who we hire then affects the culture. And so what we really focus on is people that work really hard, specifically have grit, And I don't know if you guys have talked about grit at all in your classes, but it's worth talking about. There's an amazing book on grit that I would recommend everybody read, which is essentially this ability to just like work really hard despite things not going your way, right? Like you're working really hard, it's not working out, but you keep going, and you're flexible and you adjust and you keep going because you're just determined, and you have kind of a thick skin and a willingness to continue forward. And that, I think, has been proven to be really, really valuable, especially in building companies, because building companies is really freaking hard. And so you need to have a lot of grit and a lot of thick skin to keep going and having confidence you can achieve it. So we look for people with a lot of grit. We look for people that are really good people, like genuinely good people who care about humans first. So if you talk to, anybody at Hims and Hers or at Atomic, the first thing, they'll say when I jump on a Zoom is like, hey, how you doing? How's your son? Right? How's your wife doing? Like, how was that trip last weekend you guys took? Right? Like there's a human orientation. People actually care about each other. And I think ultimately when you're building something and it's really hard, like I was saying, who you're with and the amount of time you spend with them and the fact that they care about you and you care about them ends up really mattering. Mm-hmm. So I think people who work really hard, people who are kind of human first, and I think also then people who really believe in your mission. I think that's the third bucket, because there are people who just join the latest company because it's sexy and hot and they get paid a lot of money. And those people, and I've hired a lot of those people generally don't add a lot of value to your culture or to your business. They come in, they're more about the title, they're more about the money, they're more about like posting on LinkedIn, like the new award that they got or something. But they're not about working hard and delivering value. And those people end up being really valuable for your company. So I'd say those are the three kind of traits we look for that then hopefully permeates to the culture.
Yeah. And that's awesome. I think sometimes when we think about the way that recruiting happens, it's more around, okay, did this person take this class, or what type of technical skills do they have? And so what I'm not saying is it's not that those things aren't important, but it comes down to that like human to human level, your passions, your compassion, the empathy you have for others. Those are the types of things that are differentiating. And
totally. Yeah. There will always be somebody smarter than you at whatever job you're applying for.
Yeah.
Right? There's no question. Like there is somebody who's probably more qualified from like a technical, they took more classes on health and wellness, consumer businesses like Hims and Hers that would on paper be much better than, running this company than me. And for any job you ever apply to, that would be the case. But I think the human dynamics of your work ethic, your passion, your creativity, your kind of humanity, those things at the end of the day I've found to be, why people get jobs and why people are successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And taking this back to the students that we have on here, what would you want them to kind of understand most about how, if they're interested in entrepreneurship, ideation, investing, all of these things, what would be your advice to them on how they can start working on this now, whether that be through like what they're studying in school, the way that they team, just different ways that they could tactically start thinking about these characteristics and everything now?
Yeah, I think if you're into, or if you're excited by the idea of a career in entrepreneurship, which is, by the way, like a word that kind of doesn't mean anything. And I'm sure there's a class that explains what it means, but to me, it's very vague. Like what it really means is like building something. Like if you want a career building, companies and creating things from scratch, investing money or raising money to build things, what I would recommend you guys do, and this is what I did all through Wharton when I was there, is try to meet as many people as possible, and try to learn from as many smart people as possible. Go and buy everybody you can find a $3 coffee, right? Who has any experience in this type of a world. And that could be like you tweeting at them and being like, hey, I'm a high school student and I'm super interested in the startup you're running. Like, would you let me take you to coffee? There are so many people today now, 15, 20 years later, that I work with, every single day, that when I think back on how we met, it was crazy little things like that. It was like us bumping into each other at a coffee shop and then us sitting down and talking. So, the best way to learn is to it's kind of like osmosis. You want to suck as much value from their brains and get it into your brain as quickly as possible. And when you're in high school and when you're in college, people will almost always respond to your emails. It's like this life trick that nobody tells anybody about. When you're in high school and if you email somebody and it's a thoughtful email, you'll actually get a response way more of the time than if I were to send an email to that same person. And it's because people want to help. They want to mentor others. So, the one thing I would recommend is think about companies you're interested in, think about investors you're interested in, try to reach out to them, try to find ways to connect with them and in your own ways, learn from them. Other ways to do it, read their books. Right? Read their books, read their blogs. Like so many of these people are blogging every single day. Just figure out what is in their brain. And it's the quickest way to get up to speed.
That's awesome. And I actually see one question very related to this that's really interesting. How have you been able to find a community throughout your career? Sometimes networking can feel shallow.
Yeah, networking is super shallow. So Daniel, thanks for asking that question. I hated going to networking events. I was I would get so introverted. I did not do well in large group social networking sessions because it's everyone's patting their chest. Everyone's like a peacock trying to get attention. And so, I don't think those necessarily are needed, to be honest. I think kind of going back to what I was saying first, if you position yourself not as looking for networking, but you're looking for mentors, it changes the dynamic a lot. When you reach out to somebody and are like, hey, I would love to learn from you. I would love to learn from you. I'd love to, just pick your brain on something I'm really passionate about that you seem to be an expert in. Do you mind jumping on a Zoom for 20 minutes? Or do you mind if I come by your office? Jack and I, this is actually how Jack and I first met, is we were both in San Francisco. And I was like, I haven't caught up with Jack in a long time. And I know he's doing really cool shit and I'm doing cool shit. And I was like, hey, you want to go get a raspberry chocolate Slurpee down at University Ave in Palo Alto? And he's like, hell yeah, let's do it. And we literally got a raspberry chocolate Slurpee in Palo Alto. And it was the beginning of us reconnecting and sharing what we've been up to. So, I think positioning stuff with humility, you're not there to be arrogant. You're not there to be cocky. You're not there to show off. You're there to learn and you're there to find mentors. And when you position it that way, you end up getting a way higher response of people being open with you and honest with you and not shallow in that kind of way.
Yeah, it makes your relationship so much more authentic rather than just transactional.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a bunch of questions coming in. I told you they were going to hit you with some hard ones, but if you could fix one mistake or redo something throughout your life, what would it be and why?
Oh man, that's a great.
I told you.
If I could fix one mistake or redo something. So when I was at Penn, I was I loved building stuff to the point where I barely showed up to class, just being very honest. Right. And so which ended up being very difficult for me, because when I then ended up being in positions of power and success in running businesses, I had to get back up to speed on shit that I was being taught, freshman year in college that I just didn't really quite understand as well as I should have. So what I think in retrospect, I learned is, oftentimes in middle school and in high school, what you're learning might not be like super applicable to like being a grown-up. It's like mitochondria and like, I don't know, like that kind of stuff maybe isn't applicable to like you as a grown-up. But when you get to college, a lot of the classes actually really are. Like especially at schools that are a little bit more focused, like, and the fact that you all are part of like a Wharton, program means you are, trying to understand careers and trajectories and schools. Like you're going to find yourself in classes that are actually going to be really valuable to you when you're 30 and when you're 40 and when you're 45, like what you learn in those classes. So pay attention and treat it like that. Like those are opportunities for you to get ahead in your career, not opportunities for you to get A's. Because once you're in college, what your GPA is doesn't really matter, like long term. Like you might not get that first job out of college because you didn't get a 4.0. But let me tell you, after that first job, no one gives a shit what your GPA was. I can tell you guys my GPA at Wharton, and you would be offended. You'd be like, why are we even talking to this guy? Right. So the reality is what you learn does matter and it will be valuable. So I don't think, again, this is like hindsight type stuff. I didn't really appreciate that. And I ended up, I was doing a lot of entrepreneurial stuff, which was great. And I think ended up being very valuable, but I wish I had that foresight to pick up some of those skills because it would have just been a lot less painful.
Yeah. And this could even tie into the, like, what would you do if grades didn't matter type of thing, right? Like, would you take that class that you were intimidated to take, but was worried about not getting an A in? Like,
totally. And I will tell you, grades literally do not matter.
Yeah.
Like like when you're in, by the time you're in college, like it is about what you learn and it's about who you network with and do it the right way, who your mentors are, what you're learning from them, the opportunities that come up through those mentorship opportunities. Right. It's like, that's really where the special stuff happens.
Yeah. Okay. I have another one coming in. This one's about virtual work. What is your plan for continuing to keep employees motivated, engaged, and connected when there are some instances of people not returning back in person?
Yeah. So we are actually 100% remote as a company. And I don't think we'll ever go back to an in-person headquartered office. Which is pretty crazy. But for us, we did it because it actually allowed us to hire better people. When we were based in San Francisco, the people that I could hire from were people who lived in San Francisco or who were willing to move to San Francisco. And it turns out there's a lot of smart people who don't live in San Francisco across this country. And so as we got bigger, my desire to have the best talent in the world, has stayed the same. And so we are now hiring, graphic designers from New York, brand designers from LA, heads of supply chain and fulfillment from Atlanta and Ohio, just incredible talent from all over the country, wherever the best talent lives. So that's been a huge asset to us. And I think, most companies long-term will move to that. What we end up doing is actually getting the team together, every couple months is just like the tactical way we solve for that. We have all the departments, they get together every couple months in person. So like the engineering team was in Las Vegas a few weeks ago. Our marketing team was in Chicago a couple weeks before then. I met with our executive team last week in Napa for 2 nights. The entire company is flying to Mexico in 4 weeks for like an annual offsite. So we just plan, great moments for people to get to know each other and to catch up with each other and to strategize. And then we let people go back to where they're from, work really hard, and then come back together a couple months later. It's worked for us so far.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. Especially when you have those like in between moments where people can meet in person still, but then work remotely as their day to day. You kind of get the best of both with that.
That's right.
Okay, we have Siddharth that I think this is another related question with the what is your workplace culture like? I know we've touched on this a bit, but could you tell us a little bit, I guess, if are there any other key components to culture and like what you selectively hired for or things that you tried to tactically implement to create a workplace that you think was best for your employees?
Yeah, so the I was saying that the characteristics of who we like to hire, people who work hard, like grit, people who are good people, honest people, and then people who are passionate, right? So those are kind of the characteristics. I think some of the things that we do within the team to then foster a better culture, I encourage everybody to be as direct and honest as possible. And that often like starts with me. Like I will, when I lead a meeting, I don't value being super polished, right? I don't need like 20 slides to explain a topic. The whole point of the meeting is to learn for whatever the purpose is and to have good conversations. And so I very intentionally, try to encourage people to get rid of the polish and get rid of like all the time spent on making things look pretty and sound perfect, and instead just like have the real conversation. Like, why are we here? What's at the core of the problem we're trying to solve? And let's spend all the time doing that. So it's almost like I try to encourage removing all of the shell of like ego in some ways, just so that we can solve hard problems. And I think that works really well for our company. And then also I think it's really important that everybody trusts each other. So we just have no tolerance for assholes. We have no tolerance for people who are bureaucratic and, political in nature. Like we just want people who love working together, who love building, innovative stuff and are super passionate.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you're basically just trying to take away all the roadblocks that can get into the way of your team just like doing good work.
That's
It's
right.
honestly what it comes down to. That's awesome.
That's all.
Okay, so also another question, do you have any other passion projects or interests that you're hoping to work on in the future that you might be able to share with us?
Oh man, I have a lot of them. I mean, I think I'm very interested in how we can get the youth involved in politics. Is one. I think the political machine that exists today, I mean, people who have been watching the news, are seeing that politics are actually, changing laws, and the changing of laws influences everybody's life on this call. And I think when I was a kid and when I was in college, I didn't really give a shit about politics, because it didn't affect my day to day. And I think the older I've gotten, the more passionate I've become in the power of getting people involved. It could be at a very, very local level, because it actually does influence your community. It influences, how you raise your family. It influences the access your friends have to healthcare, all this stuff. So that's something I'm pretty interested in just kind of continuing to explore. And then I'm also very interested in climate change technology. So I spend a ton of free time, researching that technology, latest technologies, whether it be, ways to, scrape carbon out of the air through direct air capture and then inject the carbon into the ground, bajillion miles down so that it never comes out, all the way to, how can we use the ocean to create mist in the air that would slow down the cooling of the ecosystem. There's just like a lot of stuff that's happening in that space that I think is going to become incredibly valuable. I think there's going to be a lot of companies built, a lot of lives saved, a lot of money invested. So, I like to spend a lot of time there because I think it's just going to be a really important category for everybody.
this actually spurs a question. I know a lot of people in this group, a lot of the students I've worked with, they are really passionate about ESG.
Yeah.
So environment, social, and governance, for those of you that are hearing that term or acronym for the first time. Can you tell the group a little bit more about how that comes into play when dealing with startups? And the reason I bring that up is because we see a lot of, like, we see different ratings sometimes attached to ESG for larger companies. We hear about companies that are more established publishing diversity, equity, and inclusion reports. But what does that look like more at the startup level?
It really is, at the startup level, it's less about what you're publishing. When you're a big company like HIMSS at this point, people are asking me, like, is our packaging sustainable? Not fully yet, right? It's something we're working on, right? Is our leadership team diverse? Is our board of directors represented by different ethnicities and different genders, right? So when you get to a big company, it's really all about, communicating outward, whether or not you're making progress on those issues. As a small company, I think it's really related to your culture and the types of people that you work with. If you are a team that really values sustainability, it's going to show up in all of the things you do. It's going to show up in the packaging. It's going to show up in your raw materials, supply chain. It's going to show up in your positioning to customers and the types of customers that want to come purchase products from your brand or whatever it might be. It's going to show up in how you travel to see your team, right? It's going to show up everywhere. And so I think in the startup level, when you're talking about sustainability and diversity initiatives, it really comes down to making sure that the people you're working with are on the same page of their values, right? And the things that they're prioritizing. Because it's not great at a startup level if you have one person who is make money at all costs and another person who, is from a completely different train of thought. Like, it just won't work. And so it's really important in the early days, especially, to make sure everybody's on the same page about those issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and so I know we're coming up on about 10 minutes. I have 3 more questions in the chat. So I think if anyone has any more burning questions, go ahead and message them to me, but we'll do a quick last call on them. But one of the ones I have here is, as technology becomes more integrated, how did technology impact your time at Wharton? And are technical skills important in the job market?
That's a great question. When I was at Wharton, it was a time when everybody was learning to code. It was like, oh my God, the most hot job in the whole country was to be like a software engineer. Like, do you know JavaScript? And if you don't know JavaScript, like, you are, you are behind the ball. I do not know JavaScript, like, at all. That is not, and it has never become valuable for me. But I know SQL, and I know how to jump into data, and I know how to get answers, and I know enough Excel to be able to do some back of the envelope math to figure out if the business is on the right track, right? And I also know enough Photoshop to dive in there that I can make my designers nervous and start adjusting their designs and tweaking them. And so I know enough about the departments and the skills needed to be successful in my company that I can dive in myself. Now, I know enough to know I'm not an expert at it too. And so for me personally, it was never critical to become, and this is also because as a CEO or as an entrepreneur or general manager, like, you don't have to be an expert in any one of these things. But you need a pretty good grasp of what it takes to do the job, because you're going to have to hire that person and know if they're good, right? And so I think it's really important to have a technical capability that's pretty well rounded. So if you're just into arts, learn Excel, take some math classes, take accounting, like, balance yourself out, because it really is true that I was just reading a book on Jeff Bezos from Amazon, and Walter Isaacson who's a famous journalist and writer. He said that the most successful people he's ever written about, Steve Jobs, Bezos, Leonardo da Vinci, these guys, they really brought together creativity, like arts, writing, the humanities, with science and math, into this really special place where it was kind of a balance of both. And so I would definitely encourage people to try to round their skill sets out. And that can mean, picking up an instrument. But I do think that ends up being valuable.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I also think when you do that, it kind of alleviates sometimes the anxiety that you might have over not knowing anything at all. You can be like, oh, I've seen this before. Like, this isn't totally foreign to me anymore. And it gives you that confidence if you ever needed to jump in that
That's right.
that you would be able to stay afloat rather than feel like you're going to sink.
That's right. I think you want to be able to ask good questions.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to know enough to be able to ask good questions.
For sure. Okay. Another one that I have for you. Along the way, I'm sure there have been difficult days. How have you been able to continue motivating yourself during those times?
Have a great, support system around you. Having it is so important. That could be like one friend that you can just totally vent to, without any stigma or shame. You can just tell them real what you're worried about, how you're feeling, or a partner, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, anybody, right? A sibling. It is really hard to build companies. It is really, really hard. There's a book that, what was his name? I think Ben Horowitz wrote. Mm-hmm. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Ben Horowitz. Oh, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Mm-hmm. This is a great book. I'm putting it in the chat. Okay, so this book has this chapter talking about the pit of hell that inevitably happens to anybody who's building a company. It's just hard. It's depressing. Things aren't working. You think you're going to have to shut down the company. This happens no matter how successful you are. It's happened probably 5 times in my career to me personally. The only thing that was helpful in those moments was just having a support system that would encourage you and just be peaceful and be in a place where you could be calm and kind of vulnerable and kind of ground yourself as you figure out what to do next. Because you're going to figure out what to do next. It will be fine. That is always the case. But in that moment, what's really just helpful is having some type of support system to lean on. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to close this out with these 2 last questions that Lorraine has in the chat. So the first one is, do you offer internships or opportunities for high school students at your company? I love that question. And then the second one being some habits as a CEO, daily life that help you to grow or improve your performance.
On the first one, I don't think we do, honestly, Lorraine, so I apologize. I don't. I'll check though with the team and get back to Marissa and see if we actually are doing any programs. But I think the team is just running a little too fast right now to be able to maybe mentor everybody. But that doesn't mean there's not people in the company who would be interested in mentoring you directly. So we might not have an official program, but what I would encourage you to do is if you're interested in marketing, let's say, go on LinkedIn or ping Marissa and have her ping me and be like, hey, I'm really interested in marketing. I found this, this woman X, Y, and Z who's on the product marketing team. And she also worked at this company, which I love. Do you mind putting me in contact with her so I could jump on a Zoom and learn from her? That people on my team would do all day long. Mm-hmm. So, we might not have a program, but there's definitely ways to learn from individuals on our team. And then what was the next one? Habits as a CEO.
Yeah. It helps you to grow or improve your performance.
Yeah, this one's ever changing. I'm testing a whole bunch of stuff nonstop, to be honest. The things that I've found to work so far are to sleep 7 or 8 hours minimum every night, which is like a lot of sleep. But it's like completely necessary, at least for me to function at the level I need to function at. To drink a lot of water throughout the day, to try to walk 10,000 steps a day. So in between meetings, like trying to walk a lot in the morning or after lunch, or after dinner, and then try to work out, in the morning before work, which is just like, you could work out, you could meditate, you could work out and then meditate for 5 minutes, like some combination of those things, sleep, walking, water, working out, meditating, I've tried hundreds of things. Those are the ones that in the last decade have stuck. And to this day, I kind of need in order to, get the performance that the team expects from me.
I resonate with that so deeply, like one too many times of like only getting 5 or 6 hours of sleep and just realizing, like I'm functioning at 70% today. And it's like, we deserve it to ourselves to be able to be at 100 for ourselves and for those around us.
Yeah. Here's my email. I just put it in the chat, by the way.
Okay. Yeah. Andrew, I think we're coming up on time. Thank you so much for talking with us. These answers were awesome. I felt like this was just incredible. Thank you for fielding all of our questions. Is it cool if I share your LinkedIn as well in the chat with the group? Okay.
Go for it.
Awesome. So here's Andrew's LinkedIn, and I think I have a large number of you on LinkedIn already, but here's mine as well. Just to Andrew's point about whether there's anything that I can do to also support you in these mentorship and internship opportunities and just making connections. Andrew's now part of your network and I am as well. So we're here to support you and be your cheerleaders. So thank you so much to everyone for joining. And thank you so much, Andrew, for being here. This was great. And I feel like we learned so much collectively just through you sharing some of your experiences and thoughts and your leadership. So we really appreciate it.
You bet. All right. Be well, everyone. Good luck.
All right. Everyone have a good night. Thanks, Andrew.
Bye now.
Bye.